Good morning, everyone. It's Kerry Jeffrey from Emotional Autoimmunity. It is morning here in Australia. It's Friday morning, which means, yay, it's a weekend tomorrow for me. So, this is my regular live time that happens to me on my Friday mornings. It's actually just 8 o'clock in the morning here. And what I'm doing for these lives for the next few weeks is that I am going through my ebook, which is Moving Through the Grief of Chronic Illness. So this is something that I was looking for when I first became chronically ill, because as a therapist and as a person, I've always been interested in the emotional side of things. So how to deal with things, get my mindset right, how to work things out, how to know where I'm going, how to understand what I'm feeling and why I'm feeling that way, and how I can help myself to feel the way that I want to feel has always been something that's very important to me. And I'm coming more and more to the realization of how important that has been, particularly to me in chronic illness, because over the past 5 years, when people have said to me, like, Kerry, what made the biggest difference to you? Like, what helped you get back on track? What helped you get from disabled to where you are now and helped you recover your health and reach remission, which I am currently in remission. It takes a lot, a fairly big thing to sort of knock me out and into a flare these days. But, you know, I still have chronic illness and it still is going to affect me in different ways. Remission just means that you're not feeling you don't have the active symptoms of the disease. It's not a cure by any means. That it just means, for me, on a day-to-day basis, that I do not have the symptoms of the autoimmune conditions I live with, which are Hashimoto's, celiac disease, and antiphospholipid syndrome. The one thing that chronic illness has done to me, it has limited my range of energy. So I am not back to where I used to be in terms of my energy, but my energy generally on most days is stable and predictable. My mood is stable and predictable, and my focus and motivation are pretty stable and predictable as well, which is very good after the last 4 or so years of that constant never knowing how much energy you're going to have. And so when people said what was the most important things, I always said, oh, well, it was changing my diet, and it was getting on to natural desiccated thyroid, or thyroid extract as it's called in Australia, which is the thyroid gland of a pig, which is desiccated, which is dried, and then it's powdered, and then it's encapsulated at a compounding pharmacy. And I'm realizing more and more that that wasn't the most important thing that I've done to change my health. The most important thing that had to come first was dealing with my trauma, dealing with my emotions, and getting my mindset right. Because without that, I would not have been able to make the changes, and there have been radical changes in my life that I have needed to make. And I have changed pretty much every area of my life, and that would not have been possible if I hadn't worked through that process. And I did see a therapist very early on, just to help me get out of some of the trauma and the shock, and just come to terms with it. I had a couple of sessions, and the rest I've been able to work through myself using the skills and mind shift tools and strategies that I already had. And so I've actually written down the process of all of the emotions that I experienced, and that, talking to quite a few people now with chronic illness, or hundreds of people by this point with chronic illness, that everybody with chronic illness is going to go through these stages. It is not a linear process by any means, as any grief model isn't a linear process, so people don't go through it step by step by step. There's various stages where you can get stuck. Some people never really progress through the whole process. It all depends on you. It depends on what sort of support that you've got. It depends on what sort of insight that you've got into yourself, whether you're self-reflective or not. It depends on your willingness to get help. So understanding the emotions of chronic illness is such an important thing, because you need to understand what's normal, right? That it is a normal part of the grief process for chronic illness, and chronic illness is different from anything else. So if you are watching live, I would love you just to say hi in the comments so that I know. Just tell me where you're watching from so that I know that somebody is actually watching. And if you're watching this on the replay, if you've got any questions, so this will be available in replay on the page for today, and I'll also upload it to my YouTube channel, and you can always go over to YouTube, look for Emotional Autoimmunity, and you can subscribe to the channel, and you'll always get notified when I post a new video. I also post a video version of my podcast these days, so if you'd like to watch the video rather than just listen on the podcast, you've got the option to do that now. So last week we talked about phase 1, which is anxiety, confusion, and self-doubt. So that is pre-diagnosis. Today we're going to talk about phase 2, which is getting your diagnosis and post-diagnosis. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to read you out this phase. I'm going to read it straight out of the book for you. And this book is free. You can get this over at my Emotional Autoimmunity website. It is my gift to you by joining my VIP email list. So all you need to do is head over to emotionalautoimmunity.com. There are various ways you can sign up for it. So there is a pop-up that will come up on the website. There is a little form at the bottom of each page, and right in the middle of the home page with a great big picture of me, there is a sign-up box there. So you just put in your first name, your email address, and the most important thing, you will receive a confirmation email, because my email provider has a double sign-up process. So you have to actually confirm that, yes, you want to go on the list. So look for that confirmation email. It might go to your spam or your junk file, so have a look there. That will come immediately after you sign up. And once you reply to that, so respond to that confirmation email, then you will be sent a welcome email from me, and in that email will be the link to the book. So you can, that's how you get that. So you must do that confirmation, or you will not be on the list. You'll just sit there in limbo. And I've had quite a few people contact me and say, oh, I signed up for your list and I didn't get your ebook, and it's because they didn't respond to the confirmation email. So let's go with phase 2, relief and shock. So prior to chronic illness, your only experience of sickness was having something that could be fixed by medication, surgery, or rest that you eventually completely recovered from. Finally, getting a diagnosis of chronic illness, depending on what you have and how it has been explained to you, can first give you a feeling of immense relief, because now you have an answer. There is actually something wrong with you that has been causing you to feel this way, and you have confirmation and validation that it was not all in your head. The relief of having a diagnosis comes with the expectation and hope that it can be fixed, and that you will soon be feeling back to normal, or that it will give you a starting point that will help you determine exactly how to deal with the illness and recover. What you are told about the diagnosis, the progression of the disease, potential treatment options, and expected outcomes will largely determine if you fully experience phase 2 or if it is delayed. You may immediately be faced with ongoing medication and monitoring of various bodily functions, including things like daily thyroid replacement hormone, regular blood testing, insulin injections and blood sugar monitoring, further, more invasive testing, surgery, drugs, immunosuppressants, steroids, and referral to specialists in particular areas of medicine. This can include potential side effects or reactions to medication or pain relief, possible outcomes of disease progression, including limited movement or function, loss of muscle strength, or becoming increasingly disabled or requiring further testing for other associated diseases. You may be offered surgery for the affected body organs, such as removal of damaged parts of your large or small intestine, partial or full removal of your thyroid, or medical destruction of your thyroid gland by radioactive iodine or interventions. Depending on the illness you are diagnosed with, you may be given little to no information about the condition you are now living with, apart from being given a prescription or drug information documents. You may be told that there is no treatment or limited treatment options, and that you will have to learn to adapt to your new normal, with no information given as to what that may be or how you will manage your life and continue to work and function. The amount of relief or shock you experience will be determined by many factors, including how and what you are told, what information you are given about the illness and the disease progression, your own personality, and your doctor's attitude and approach. Chronic illness that has no treatment or is seen to be easily treated, like thyroid disease, are more likely to be minimized or trivialized as something the patient just has to learn to live with. The one piece of information that is almost always conveyed to you is that the disease is chronic and incurable, and the focus is alleviation of pain and symptoms. Until a disease is actually diagnosed, it does not seem to be real. So it's easy to live with the hope that one day it will just go away as mysteriously as it arrived and you will be back to normal. Being told that you now have an incurable, lifelong illness that may or may not get worse is a clear emotional demarcation that your life has just irrevocably changed and the life you knew before is gone. Shock is a form of emotional trauma. When you are in emotional shock, you cannot seem to think straight. Your formerly safe and predictable life has been shaken to the core by an event that you were totally unprepared for and did not foresee happening to you. You can feel anxious and fuzzy-headed. You can experience disassociation, where everything feels unreal or that you are detached or disconnected from yourself or others. The big rush of adrenaline from emotional shock makes your heart race, your stomach clench, and leaves you feeling weak and shaky. Emotional shock can induce vomiting, nausea, feeling faint or like you are going to pass out, or be expressed with uncontrollable or hysterical sobbing. Some people in shock experience the feeling of stepping completely outside of themselves, so that they feel like they are observing themselves reacting, but they're unable to do anything to change or control it. Your thoughts can feel all over the place, or you can feel like a different person entirely, as shock can create a temporary change of personality. Formerly social people can become withdrawn and want to be left alone, and become isolated from friends and family. More introverted people can suddenly feel the need to be around others, wanting to go out every night or do things with others in order to distract themselves from what they are feeling. Emotional shock can also trigger off past traumatic events, adding to the feelings of fear and anxiety that your world is no longer a safe, predictable place and that things will never be the same again. It is also possible to experience delayed shock so that you feel calm at the time, but days or even weeks later, the shock hits you and you feel like you are suddenly falling apart. If your diagnosis was one that was trivialized, the level of shock you are experiencing can feel out of all proportion to what is happening. It can feel like you are making a big deal over nothing, and that you are being overly dramatic or hysterical, which makes it feel even worse because you don't feel validated or supported. Even though you feel that you've just been given a life sentence that you'll have to try and deal with, those close to you may not understand either the seriousness of the disease and minimize it, or go through their own feelings of shock and denial, and they are not emotionally available to you. Everyone experiences emotional shock differently, and how long it takes to pass depends on the individual. If the effects of shock last for more than 6 months, professional help in the form of counselling is advised. So as you can see with this phase, there is a lot going on, right? So you finally get that rush of relief, and I felt that, like, when I got the call from the doctor after I'd had my blood test saying, we know what it is and it's easily treatable, I had this rush of relief, like, oh, thank God. Maybe I've got, some really bad virus, or I've got some sort of infection or something like that that's causing me to feel this way, because at the time I thought I had a really bad flu or something like that. And then when I went along to the doctor, he told me on the phone that it was my thyroid. It was an issue with my thyroid. My thyroid wasn't working. And so I started doing my research, and found out that low thyroid, hypothyroidism, is, if it's autoimmune, then it's Hashimoto's. So I knew that, and I had a little bit of a look, but I thought, oh, well, he said it's easily treated, so maybe it's not that bad. So I didn't really know. I was just relieved that there was an answer for it, and I just thought, well, I'll go in and I'll do whatever I need to do, and within a few weeks or a few months I'll be back to normal. And so when I went in there, and he said basically, well, your thyroid's dead, it's past its shelf life, it's not functioning, you're just going to have to take thyroid medication and get used to your new normal. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, why would my thyroid just stop working? And he said, well, I don't know. It's just something. We don't know why it happens. It just happens. And I said, well, what do I have to do? And he said, you just take your pill. I'll write you a prescription. You just take that. And I'm like, well, so will I get back to normal? And he said, no, you've got to get used to your new normal. Your thyroid is damaged and it's not functioning. And this is just how it's going to be, basically. And then we had an argument about, because he told me I had Graves' disease, and I knew I didn't have Graves' disease, because I said, no, that is the hyper version. Low thyroid is because I had barely discernible traces. Like, my TSH was 174, my thyroid hormones were incredibly low, way below the normal range. And so we had a bit of a discussion about that, and then I just walked out of there feeling like, if I'm going to survive, like, this guy's not going to help me. He's got nothing. I've got this little prescription for 50 micrograms of thyroxine. He's got nothing. It's going to be up to me. If I'm going to save my life, it's going to be up to me. And so that initial wave of relief didn't last very long. I felt like I was looking down a very long, dark tunnel. And that was when the shock set in. And it was traumatic. It was incredibly traumatic. And I drove home in a bit of a daze. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And I just logically thought, there must be an answer. There must be an answer. There must be an answer to this. It doesn't make sense. Why would a vital part of my body stop working? Like, why would my body be attacking that? It doesn't make sense. And I had to work through that, right? And I didn't believe that there was nothing more that could be done. I mean, that was just ridiculous. Just like, accept it. Like, just accept this. Like, no, it was not acceptable. I knew there must be more things outside of conventional medicine. I knew there must be ways to help my body. And so that started off that process within me of that I became focused on finding solutions. And then I went into the next phase that I'm going to talk about next week. And it turned out that I had a very positive form of that phase. So depending on, as I said in reading out that, depending on how your doctor gives you the news will largely determine how you respond to that news. So if you're given something, if you've got something like I do, which is Hashimoto's, doctors tend to really trivialize that and see that as not a great big deal, right? They have what they believe is the fix for that, which is to give you thyroxine, which they believe is adequate thyroid hormone replacement, which it's actually not. It's only one form of one of the 5 thyroid hormones that your own thyroid makes. So you've got T1, T2, T3, T4, and calcitonin. That is what your thyroid actually makes. And what they give you is T4, which is a storage hormone of the storage version of thyroid hormone, which is what our own thyroid, that makes the most of that. But in order to process that, you need to have a really good functioning liver, because the liver does the conversion to the active T3, and you need a good functioning gut. And most of us with autoimmune disease have some form of organ compromise, and definitely we all have issues with our gut, because it is considered that in most of the research that a leaky gut is where most autoimmune conditions begin. And that causes the inflammation, and then the inflammation goes on to attack different forms of the body. Excuse me, too much talking. So if it's trivialized, then the level of shock to you can feel out of proportion, because you think, I'm feeling so awful. Like, I'm feeling like I've hardly got any energy. I can't think straight. I can't function. I don't know if I can work. I don't feel like myself. And you're telling me that this is now my normal life, and you're treating it like it's no big deal. Like, it's the start of that medical gaslighting, right? That how you feel is really, you're blowing it all out of proportion, or you're making too much of it, or it's not really as bad as you make it out to be. And that's really hard to deal with, because you're also being told that this is not going to go away. So there's no end in sight. And then you're facing living with that, living with how you feel right now. And that is going to be your new normal life. And that's a shock. And if you have had past trauma, something like that can trigger that past trauma. So you are going to be getting flashbacks, you're going to be triggered, you're going to be having nightmares. So it's going to make everything emotionally so much harder for you. And of course, when we have active trauma and when our stress levels are high, that raises the levels of inflammation, and that makes all of the symptoms of whatever autoimmune condition you've got so much worse. And a stressed body can't heal, right? So if your doctor tells you and you've got something that they consider to be a lot more serious, that is progressive and could eventually lead to permanent and ongoing and worsening disability, something like multiple sclerosis, for example, or scleroderma, generally what they do is they send you off with a whole stack of drug information and immunosuppressants, things like prednisone and other things like that, and say, you to go through that and choose which one of these drugs that you want to try. What we need to do is suppress your immune system. That also means that you're going to be more prone to picking up any virus or anything that comes along. So you're going to have to be more careful about, what you do. You might need to do some self-isolation, things like that. So they just send you off and they leave you to process it all. And this can be after giving you a long laundry list of all of the things you might be facing, which could be, losing the loss of being able to use your legs, eventually ending up in a wheelchair, eventually reaching the point where you won't be able to walk or work, or all of those different sorts of things. So you're sitting there with this, you've just been given this massive amount of information that, one, you've got this permanent disease, and that two, it has worsening, like it's going to continue to get worse and worse and worse until you are going to end up disabled. So you're going to lose your mobility, lose your independence. You might need a care at some stage in the future. So all of this really devastating, dark sort of potential as to what can happen to you. and literally that there's nothing much they can do about it apart from give you these immunosuppressant drugs and try and manage and delay the progression of the disease. So it is a shock, and it is traumatic. And research has shown that diagnosis of chronic illness can cause trauma and cause PTSD. And it's not really acknowledged and it's not really validated, right? And we don't really talk about it, which is the reason why I focus on the emotional aspects of chronic illness. And there, as I said, there are various different examples to shock. So you can feel that disassociation as if you are completely distanced from yourself and from your body, from your life, like you're floating and just observing. You don't feel anything. Nothing feels real at all. Nothing seems to touch you. And it's like you're just in this bubble. You just don't feel anything, which is shock. You're just numb. And it's like your brain just stops. And then eventually it will hit you at some stage. It could be immediately after. It could be weeks or days or even months later. And your personality or what you need can change. So for me, I am an introvert. I'm a highly sensitive person. I'm also an empath. So generally, for me to recover, I like to be alone. And I like to be left alone and just don't talk to me, just leave me. And I went the complete opposite. I craved being near people, especially physical contact. I wanted physical nearness to people. So I would be, because I live in a two-story house. So where I'm now is on the second story in my office. And this used to be my eldest son's bedroom. And I would be downstairs laying in bed, just feeling really isolated, feeling really alone, feeling all of the symptoms in my body, being scared by what was going on, in my shock, in my grief. And I would literally crawl up the stairs because I couldn't walk up the stairs. Because, if you've got Hashimoto's, sometimes your legs just feel like lead. You can barely lift them. And going upstairs or up any sort of incline is incredibly hard. So I crawled up the stairs to where both my boys would be sitting on my son's bed, playing the PlayStation together, and I would just crawl up onto the bed and just lay between them. And sometimes I would just lay there and cry. And after a while, they just got used to that. The first time it happened, they were a little bit shocked and they were like, "Mum, what's going on? What are you doing?" I just said, "Don't, just ignore me. I just want to be here. I just want to be near you." And so that's what I would do. Crawl up the stairs, crawl up onto the bed, lay there between my boys so I could just feel their physical warmth and their nearness and just listen to them play their game and just be close to them. It was almost like that. I was reduced back to that sort of animal state where you just want that closeness and nearness of somebody, just to be near them, not saying anything, not talking, just to get that comfort, which was the complete opposite of what I normally do. And that was about all I could do because I had so little energy that I couldn't talk. I had to stop talking to people on the phone because it exhausted me and I didn't have energy for anything else. Like after a meal, I couldn't do anything or talk or do anything because my body was using all of my energy to digest the food. So I could literally feel the energy it took for my body to digest, and there was very little left over for me. So I couldn't really talk. When I could talk, I didn't sound like myself. The brain fog that I had was so intense that I could barely remember even simple words, and I was often just reduced to pointing to the things that I wanted, or I would get dyspraxia, which is that I was replacing one word for another word, or I was reversing words, it was just, and I was aware that my brain wasn't functioning, and that was the weirdest part. That was like I was observing myself, like I could listen to myself and observe the way my brain was working, and I knew that my brain wasn't working, and that was terrifying. Listening to myself and observing the way that my brain was working was terrifying. So this stage also includes just that feeling all of those symptoms and understanding that, you know, there is no cure for this, and how am I going to manage this? How am I going to deal with this? How am I going to try and fix this or change this or improve this? Because unfortunately, there are very few doctors who will tell you that any form of improvement is even possible. Most doctors don't believe that how you think has anything to do with how you feel. Most doctors don't believe that what you eat has any impact on your symptoms or your body or the disease. How you manage stress, they will acknowledge. That is one thing they will acknowledge. That is one universal thing for all diseases, including heart disease. What they will tell you is that you must deal with stress because of the inflammatory effects of stress on the body, which will exacerbate whatever disease that you've got. And so stress management is incredibly important. So as I said, if you want to get your hands on this, right, it's a digital version. I've just printed this out, right? It's a PDF. All you have to do, head over to my website, sign up for my VIP email list, right? My VIPs get all of the good stuff. They get all of my content, access to it all days before I post it on my social media. So they get all of this stuff first. If I have any special offers, which I occasionally do, sometimes I do have special offers on my programs and my therapy, they always get that offer first. Any new things I've got coming up, which will include an online course in the essential emotional skills and stuff, that is a work in process that I'm in the process of setting up now. I've got it sort of drafted out, but there's a lot of other things that need to happen for that. They will be the first to know. So there are a lot of advantages to being on my VIP email list, and Moving Through the Grief of Chronic Illness ebook is my thank you for signing up for my list. It's also a great thing to share with your partner so they can understand all of the normal emotional responses that you are going to be going through. It just gives them an idea of the enormity of what this is doing to your life, because chronic illness, as you and I know, is a life-changing event, and that is really important. So if you've got any questions, please type them in now. I'd love to answer them. And if you need help sleeping, if you are really struggling with stress, if you are feeling that you're in a constant state of stress all the time and you're anxious and you can't think straight, then over at my website, emotionalautoimmunity.com, if you go to my products page, you will see in there the Relaxed Hypnotherapy Bundle. That is going to help you. It is absolutely going to help you. Hypnotherapy, my own hypnotherapy, listening to my own recording was the only thing that helped me stop that anxiety, that constant draining anxiety that I was feeling every single day through the worst parts of my illness. It was the only thing that gave me any relief. It was the only thing that helped me get to sleep and allow my body to rest, because if you can't get your body into the rest and digest phase that it needs to go through, which is normally overnight when our body goes through that phase, the liver does its thing, the digestive system does its thing, that is when you are healing. And if you can't get into rest and digest, if you are stuck in the stress response, fight, flight, freeze, anxiety, your body cannot heal. A stressed body cannot heal. It doesn't matter what you're eating. It doesn't matter what supplements you're taking. Your body needs to get into rest and digest, because that is where the healing happens. And this is going to help you get into this process. It is only $25 Australian. If you are not in Australia, you can use the currency converter and see how much it's actually costing you, and you download it to your computer. Don't try and download it to your phone or your tablet. It will not stay there. it has to be downloaded to your computer, and then from there you can just listen to it, right? You can, if you've got Apple, using Apple software, you can put it into iTunes and listen to it that way. So there is a hypnotherapy recording, there is an ebook with all of my best tips and strategies on managing your mind, getting out of those anxiety producing thoughts, and there is also an audio version of the ebook for those days where you're feeling in brain fog, right? If you are feeling so overwhelmed, if your trauma has been re-triggered, if you are feeling stuck in trauma, right? If you can't seem to make the changes, if your motivation is not there, if you're constantly self-sabotaging, if you're feeling isolated from your partner and you feel like your relationship is starting to fail, you can always book your free discovery session with me. I work with individuals. I also work with couples. I have a special couples program that's going to help the two of you get reconnected again and start understanding that the chronic illness is part of your lives now, and you both have to adapt and come together, right, to make these changes that are going to help you. So I have a free discovery session. It is not a sales call. It is just an opportunity for you to interview me as a therapist. I interview you as a potential client. I tell you which of my programs that I recommend. I don't do single sessions. I work in programs for very good reasons. I don't do traditional therapy. We don't just talk about the issue. I am a counsellor, I am a hypnotherapist, but I'm also a coach, right? So I have a program for which I have a plan for every single session. I have this all overarching process. I know exactly what needs to happen at every single step, and it is flexible enough that it is adaptive to you. So it's all about supporting you and getting you the results that you need. But there is a plan, there is a process, there is a framework, there are skills and mind shift tools and strategies I will teach you, including an emotional framework. And if you are a highly sensitive person or an empath, you need an emotional framework to use. You need strong boundaries, because being a highly sensitive person and getting chronic illness is a recipe for disaster. It makes everything so much worse. So if you think about it logically, guys, nothing could have prepared you for chronic illness. And the skills that you had before chronic illness are not enough to take you through the next phases of your life, to be able to adapt, to be able to take control of your health and your life and your happiness. For this new life, you need new skills and new strategies and a new framework. And these are all of the things that I needed to work out for myself. These are all of the things that I used, and my mindset and all of these tools and strategies are the biggest thing that enabled me to change my life and take responsibility for my health and make all of the big life changes that I have made to get to where I am now. Without that, I would not have been able to do a thing. So please understand, if you are not addressing the emotional, you are not going to get the best possible results. And if you are in trauma, if you are in constant stress, a stressed body isn't going to be able to heal. So thanks for watching and thanks for listening. I'll be back next week with phase 3 of moving through the grief of chronic illness. And if you've got any questions, please post them in the comments underneath the video, or post them over on YouTube when this is uploaded, and I'll be more than happy to reply to them. I can't give individual advice, right? I can answer in general terms. If you want to know more about how I can help you, the best way to do that is book in your free discovery session with me. So I'll see you next week, guys. Have a great day. Bye.